Welcome to part 3 of moving your shared components to the next level. In this video, we're going to conclude our series and actually talk about how we could build that with Team Build and actually push it to an internal component repository. So where do those packages actually live? Well, they can live on NuGet.org, as we saw, getting common components like Entity Framework and all those things. And those are mostly for open source. We'll find the .NET framework on there as well, and all those other very common tools. We can actually send to a share. This is, maybe a poor man's choice if we don't have an internal NuGet server, but it's a good alternative, better than actually having no NuGet at all. We can create our own internal servers. NuGet.org has a template that we can just basically copy and instantiate inside of our organization. It's a little bit hard to set up, but it replicates exactly what's available on NuGet.org. Or we can actually use NuGet itself to download a NuGet server template inside of a blank web server, and that basically will give us an internal website that we can actually push our components to, which is a good solution. And finally, there's a free version for both ProGet and MyGet, which are commercial products. And essentially, you can create ProGet is a full install that you can install internal. The commercial version supports Active Directory and other more advanced tools, but the free version is pretty good for just small teams and when you don't have that many products. And this is what I'm going to be using in my demo. And also, MyGet is a web-only version, which also supports private feeds where you can actually just push your own internal products as well. So now that we have a repository, so it could be a share, it could be an internal instantiation of NuGet, or even NuGet.org if we want to push open source projects. How do we actually do that? Well, we're going to use the NuGet push command from the command line, or we could actually do that as part of build. So I'm going to demo both of these options and we'll see how that works. Also, we could, and I'm going to do that as part of the build, is I can build both the debug and the release components and actually send that to two different feeds, and those can actually be used by the developer and the build server. So the developer would use the debug version of the package so that they have symbols and they can actually debug inside of the package, and the build version would actually compile with the release version. This way, what we ship to our customer is the release version of the component as opposed to the debug version. So let's go into a demo. So I'm back to my Visual Studio project, which we were looking at in the last video, which was Matlab. And in here, I talked about the fact that I had two new spec file, and we actually went to the command line and we actually produced a NuGet.pack. So what if I would just want to test this before I actually publish that to the whole team to make sure that it actually works and it does what I'm expecting to do? So we'd open our solution and go into File Explorer. We'd actually grab the new pack file, and let's navigate to the C drive, the root of C. And in here, let's just create a folder and let's call it NuGet test, for example. And I'm actually going to go in here and I'm going to paste the new pack file here. Now, mind you, this is not a share, and that's fine because we just want to test our internal, the internal package ourselves. So I can start a new version of Visual Studio and basically start a new project. We're going to pick a console application here. .NET Framework 4 is fine. We don't want to add it to source control. We're going to create a new project. It's going to create a console app here. And what we'd like to do is basically just reference our application. Now, in order to do that, I would want to open my NuGet package. And what I can actually do is go in my settings and create a new local location where my package are going to be. So I'm going to plus this, and in here I would call this local, and from here I would actually just point it to my local folder. So C NuGet test, which we created a moment ago. So I'm just going to basically update this. This is going to be available now, and if I go to local, we'll see that our Matlab is actually there. So I can actually just install this into my solution. I get my little green check, which is great. I can close this, and now I can see that both my content files are available here, And also, if I go under my references, I can see that Matlab is also referenced. And if I drill down and go to my path, I can see that it's referencing the 4.0 path of my Matlab. Now, just to validate that this works fine, I can just create var math equals new, and then let's just call it matlab dot mat class, and then open that, and finally just go math dot add, and we can see that both our method is actually available here in IntelliSense Work, and I can actually go back here at the top and compile this, and it's all good. So we see that everything seems to be working fine with our library. So now we'd like to actually push it to a known repo for our team. So our known repo, if it's a share, it's just basically a copy paste, which is quite easy to do. But we could also push it to, for example, proget, which is what I have here. So I can actually do that by saying NuGet push, and then I'm actually going to point it to my pack file, and then I'm just going to say source and HTTP. In my case, it's TFS 2013S colon 777, and then NuGet and debug, which is the feed that I actually want to push it to. So I'm going to do that, and now it's available on my internal server. So if I actually do a reference here and we try to look at the local NuGet server, which is the ProGet version here, I actually will see that my Matlab is available here. It's not the same version. I can actually go get version 1 by actually going to the command line and NuGet to do that. So I can close this, and now what we want to do is we actually want to use Team Build to create our file, our new pack file, and actually publish it if possible. So how do we do that? I'm actually going to go to Team Build, and I'm going to open my build node, and I actually have a Matlab build definition here. I'm going to open that. So this is very similar to what we saw in the other videos. It's going to run on a continuous integration basis. It's going to grab everything under my Matlab here. It's going to go down, and finally under process, the only difference that I have here is I have under the advance, I'm actually pointing to a post build script which is called NuGet create and pack. So let's actually go and see that particular file and see what that is. So I'm actually going to open Source Control Explorer. We're actually going to drill down to our location, and then there's a file called NuGet create and pack. So this file actually, I'll spare you the beginning of it. It's the same as the other file that was doing the post build stuff. The only difference here is that it's creating a directory called in the bin directory called NuGet debug, and it's also copying the PDBs as well as all of the DLLs in those folders. It does the same thing for NuGet release, copies the PDBs as well. Then it's actually looking for a version number from our build. It's getting the new version, and it looks for all the files called star.newspec, and then it goes through all those files, and it's actually going to create a new pack for each one of those. So the first thing it actually does is it goes in there and it changes the version inside of the newspec file to actually be the build version. So that's why it's 1.0.0.0, so it can actually do the same thing it was doing for the actual assembly info.cs. Next, based on the name of the file, and that's why in our solution we have, I'm going to go back to the other one. So that's why in our solution we have a debug and a release. And in each one of them, it actually will go to different location to actually grab the assets. So from here, we continue and we actually do the command line, which is called NuGet pack, which actually will take our new spec file and we'll take an output directory where I want to actually put that, and we'll take properties, namely our outdir, and we'll replace that so that it knows where to actually grab the DLLs. And finally, it'll go up and do a NuGet push, and it's going to take our new pack file and it's going to push it to the ProGet server to the feed in question. So it's very simple, just two executable, and basically will have pushed that to our NuGet feed. So we're actually going to go and try to execute this. I'm going to queue a build, double click to open it up. So the build completed successfully, and we can see again our solution was compiled. We can see test runs. In this case, our test runs, we had 4 tests that actually passed, and the instrumented binaries have 100% code coverage. We can also see that both the release and the debug were actually done here. And if we go to our drop folder, we'll actually see that we have our debug, our release, and we have a NuGet folder. And inside of our NuGet folder, we have both a debug and a release version. And we have our Matlab 2015 3.20.2, which we see matches our build version over here. And if we go in Visual Studio, in our console application, we can now actually go into our solution, apply the NuGet, and look for our local server, and we'll see that now we have 2015.3.20.2, which was built just now, that is actually available to us, and we can actually install this version, and that will actually replace our version in our source with the new version here, which is the proper version we're looking for. And if we were to compile this version, and as we can see, everything compiled successfully, so we're good to go on this particular version. Now this, interestingly enough, actually compiles both the debug and the release feeds, so we now have both our releases available. So how does that work into our application? Well, now we have our own internal common components, which we will compile and push to our internal NuGet server or share. And from Visual Studio, as you can see, I can right click, grab the NuGet panel, and then pick from our internal share or internal NuGet server and basically apply it to components or applications in either our development or main or etc. So in conclusions, you can see that NuGet is very powerful. It has a full VS integrated component management system. It is much better to all the alternative we discussed in the first video. It's a global direction for most major components in .NET. So the core, the enterprise library, Entity Framework, jQuery, etc. And there's a cool new interface in Visual Studio 2015. Thanks for your attention in this series of video. If you'd like some one-on-one help with creating automated build, release, or deployment, or maybe you just don't have the time to do it yourself, I'd recommend Imaginet's 10-day automated build and release management quick start. If you're interested, just email us at info@imaginet.com.